Ryan Carter stood in front of the old garage and stared at the rust-covered building. The roof was falling apart, the windows were cracked, and weeds had grown through the concrete. An abandoned sedan sat near the entrance, covered in dust and rust. Most people wouldn't have accepted the property for free, but Ryan wasn't most people. Across from him stood Mark Henderson, the CEO of one of the largest automotive companies in the state. Mark looked at the building, then at Ryan, and laughed. "I still can't believe you're buying this place. This garage has been dead for years." Ryan smiled calmly. "Maybe it just needs someone who believes in it." Mark shook his head. "Believe whatever you want. No customers, outdated equipment, and a terrible location. You're throwing away your money." A few minutes later, the paperwork was signed. Ryan handed over his last $1,000, just like that. The garage became his. As Mark drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror and smirked. In his mind, Ryan had just purchased a disaster. The next morning, Ryan arrived before sunrise. He unlocked the rusty front door and stepped inside. The place smelled of oil, dust, and neglect. Every corner seemed to remind him how impossible this challenge was. But Ryan had faced difficult situations before. After losing his previous job during company layoffs, he had spent months searching for opportunities. While others saw failure, he saw a second chance. For the next several weeks, Ryan worked harder than he ever had in his life. He cleaned every inch of the garage, repaired old tools, fixed wiring, and painted walls. He watched repair tutorials late into the night and woke up before dawn every morning. Some days he barely slept for hours. By the end of the first month, the garage looked completely different. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive again. The problem was that nobody knew it existed. Days passed without a single customer. Bills started piling up. His savings disappeared faster than expected. More than once, Ryan sat alone in the office wondering if everyone had been right. Maybe he had made a terrible mistake. Maybe Mark had seen something he did and single quotes Then one afternoon, an elderly man drove into the parking lot with an old pickup truck that looked like it had survived 3 decades of hard work. The man stepped out and explained that several repair shops had refused to fix it because replacement parts were difficult to find. Ryan examined the truck carefully. "It won't be easy," he admitted. The old man sighed. "I figured that. Everyone else turned me away." Ryan looked at him for a moment and then smiled. "I'll do it." The man's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes, give me a few days." A week later, the truck was running better than it had in years. The old man couldn't believe it. Before leaving, he took photos and posted them online with a short message praising Ryan's honesty and workmanship. Neither of them expected what happened next. Within 48 hours, thousands of people had seen the post. Local residents began sharing it across social media. Comments flooded in. People were amazed that someone had restored a vehicle that others had considered hopeless. Soon the phone started ringing. Then it rang again and again. Within a week, Ryan had more requests than he could handle. For the first time since buying the garage, he felt genuine hope. 2 months later, Ryan hired his first employee, then another, then a third. The garage became busier every day. Customers appreciated something that had become rare in business honesty. Ryan treated every customer with respect, whether they owned a luxury sports car or an old family vehicle, worth only a few $100s. Word spread quickly. One customer recommended him to friends. Those friends recommended him to others. Before long, people were driving from neighboring cities just to visit Ryan's garage. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. One rainy afternoon, a woman arrived with a transporter carrying a severely damaged 1969 muscle car. The vehicle had been sitting abandoned for years after a fire. The paint was ruined, the engine was destroyed, and much of the interior had melted. Most mechanics would have called it scrap metal. The woman explained that the car had belonged to her late father. It was the last thing she had that reminded her of him. Ryan walked around the vehicle silently. Finally, he looked at her and said, "I'll restore it." She stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "I am." For the next month, Ryan and his team worked day and night. Every damaged part was repaired or replaced. Every detail was carefully restored. It became more than just a project, it became a mission. When the restoration was finally complete, the result was breathtaking. The muscle car looked as though it had just rolled out of the factory decades earlier. The owner burst into tears when she saw it. She posted a video online showing the transformation. The video exploded across the internet. Millions of views poured in from around the country. Automotive pages shared it. Influencers reacted to it. News stations requested interviews. Suddenly, Ryan's small garage became one of the most talked about restoration businesses in America. Customers began arriving from other states. Some traveled hundreds of miles. Others shipped vehicles directly to him. Revenue skyrocketed. The business expanded faster than anyone expected. 3 months later, Ryan purchased the vacant building next door. Then another property across the street. New equipment arrived. Additional technicians were hired. The tiny garage that people once mocked was transforming into a serious company. Exactly 6 months after buying the garage, Ryan received an invitation to a national business conference celebrating America's fastest-growing small businesses. At first, he considered declining. He was too busy. But eventually, he decided to attend. The conference hall was packed with entrepreneurs, investors, and executives from major corporations. As Ryan entered the building, he noticed a familiar face sitting near the front. Mark Henderson, the CEO who had sold him the garage. Mark didn't notice Ryan. He was focused on a presentation happening on the giant screen. The speaker began discussing extraordinary business growth stories from the past year. Then a slide appeared. Ryan Auto Revival. Revenue growth, 1,700%. New employees, 42. Expansion plans nationwide. The audience applauded. Mark nearly dropped his coffee. He stared at the screen in complete disbelief. There was no way. The same garage he had considered worthless was now one of the fastest-growing automotive businesses in the country. The following morning, Mark drove directly to Ryan's property. What he saw left him speechless. The old junk garage was gone. In its place stood a thriving operation with multiple service bays, modern equipment, professional staff, and a parking lot filled with vehicles from across the country. Employees moved confidently between projects. Customers waited in reception areas. Delivery trucks came and went. The place was alive. Ryan noticed Mark standing outside and walked over to greet him. For a moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "I was wrong." Ryan smiled slightly. "About what?" "The garage." Ryan looked around at the busy facility. "You weren't the only one." Mark shook his head. "I thought I sold you a worthless building." Ryan glanced at the original structure. That still stood at the center of the growing business. "No," he said quietly. "You sold me an opportunity. Most people just couldn't see it." Mark nodded. At that moment, he realized something important. Success isn't always about having more money, better connections, or greater resources. Sometimes success comes from seeing potential where everyone else sees failure. As the sun began to set, Ryan stood outside the garage that had started it all. 6 months earlier, people had laughed at him. They saw a broken building, a failed business, and a hopeless investment. Ryan saw a chance, and that single decision changed everything. What others called junk became an empire. What others called impossible became reality. And what started with just $1,000 became a story that inspired millions.